Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather on this December 4th already. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information at 1-800-472-0391 or at weather.gov/Alaska. And if you can't find what you need there, feel free to send me an email anytime. I'm happy to help in any way I can. david.snider@noaa.gov is how you find me on the email. Here's a look at the hazards around Alaska tonight. We're going to start in northern parts of southeast around the White Pass region and the Klondike Highway. A winter storm watch will go into effect for tomorrow, mainly during the day, about 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or so, for the potential of about 4 to 8 inches of snow or so, and it will make travel tricky if that occurs. So plan accordingly if you're heading out of town or expecting some folks to arrive from out of town. Keep them advised of the weather as best you can and the potential of snow and winter driving conditions along White Pass. Again, for as much as 4 to 8 inches of snow. A look further northward shows that high wind is still an issue for the upper Kuskokwim all the way around the Alaska Range and into the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, as well as Denali. Looks like those gusts could push from the south about 65 to 75 miles per hour. So the weather we have now will likely continue through a good chunk of the daytime tomorrow. So be prepared for that. And that warming wind is creating some slick driving conditions around the Fairbanks area, as it is in south central, of course, as you probably know if you've been in and out. That warm weather, again, making a pretty nasty ice rink around the Fairbanks region. No warning or advisory for that. It's just kind of a winter warm-up situation, but do be careful if you're driving up and down through the Fairbanks region. A little bit further north and to the west and south, everything shaded in yellow is a winter weather advisory, and that either means the snow is blowing around, that's on the ground already and creating poor visibility, or snow is falling and also blowing around and creating poor visibility. So kind of a tricky situation. We have winter weather advisory for the St. Lawrence Island, the western part of the Seward Peninsula, all the way from the Yukon Delta to the Yukon Flats region and along the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range all the way out toward the Chukchi Seacoast and up through the Wainwright region. Now what that means is most places out west are dealing with the chance for at least about 1 to 3 inches of snow. Some cases out east a little bit less than that, but in general snow is blowing around, and plan your travel accordingly and be careful as you go. Now, after all that depressing news, here's something pretty from Annie Wayowana up around the Shishmaref area. She sent us this picture, shared it with our Alaska Sea Ice program. This is Kotzebue Sound, and a look out. And if you look carefully there, that appears to be the full moon there. Might be a plane, but I'm going to go with full moon because it sounds like a better picture. And if you look out west, something I've learned recently is that you can kind of see where the open water is by the color of the clouds. And that's kind of a cool trick there. Something I didn't know years and years ago, so now I do. Thanks for sharing that. And you can also see that it looks like the winds have been pulling away the ice a little bit there in Kotzebue Sound. So something to pay attention to. We'll have the ice update for you here in just a few minutes. Thank you, Annie, for sharing this lovely picture of Shishmaref there, and hope to see more. And you can share yours with me anytime. Check that email address, david.snider@noaa.gov. Love to see what it looks like where you are in your Alaska. Here's the way it looks on the satellite picture tonight. A deep band of low pressure working in from south to north. This is encouraging a tremendous amount of wind to move over the Kenai Peninsula, the Chugach Range, and the Alaska Range. This is creating a warm-up in Fairbanks, a warm-up in south central, and a lot of warm air already on the move, and deep warmth as well as good amounts of precipitation working through the region, so it is quite a mess with this. That warm and wet air also heading for southeast. You'll see several bands of this working through in the next couple days. This is just wave 1. It looks like we have another one coming later tonight into tomorrow, and then again Tuesday night into Wednesday. So prepare yourself. We're going to be stuck in this pattern for quite some time. Where is the cold air? It's out west. All this speckled kind of cloud cover on the satellite picture tells us where it is, but by the time it moves in to the Gulf, it is combating a lot of warmth heading in from the south. We do have cold weather up across the north. That easterly flow is continuing over the north slope and bending into the northern and eastern sections of Russia and Siberia. So it is there. It's just not making it any further south or into the interior at this point. It is cold enough to snow, though. Winter weather advisories for snow and blowing snow up and down the west coast and into the central and northern interior. Not for Fairbanks tonight. Periods of rain and snow will continue around south central as temperatures get pretty close to freezing. We'll see how close they get. It might not go below. For southeast, one wave of weather is working through, and again, that should encourage the potential for some snow around the White Pass area and that winter storm watch for the Klondike Highway. High wind warnings continue, and visibility may drop at times for areas that still have some dry snow, but a lot of this is warming up, so many locations along that region will likely not have a blowing snow issue as much as you did 24 hours ago. Colder air is trying to drop southward. That may encourage a little bit more of a wind across the north slope as we get into tonight and tomorrow. Here's our next wave. Low pressure out over the open waters of the Gulf moves northward quickly by Tuesday, and that warm front means warm air is behind it. This is moving northward, so south central will have another opportunity for rain and snow and wind. For southwest, snow showers continue for the chain, for the Pribilofs, a rain-snow mix there, and for the west coast, notice that low pressure here north of St. Lawrence Island is encouraging a stiff southerly flow. So again, ice is on the move for Norton Sound and for Kotzebue Sound there, as we just saw from Annie's picture. The warm weather continues pushing northward on Wednesday, the pressure gradient tightening up for southeast. So you're going to notice more wind there as we get into the midweek. And also for areas, especially in the eastern Alaska range into the middle Tanana Valley points upriver in the Yukon. Pressure gradients tightening up for the north slope, so plan on some changes there. And colder air is dropping southward into the western Bering Sea with another low across the central Aleutians. My goodness, what a messy map. Let's take a look at the temperatures really quickly here as we get into southeast, upper 30s to lower 40s tonight, at or maybe just a hair below freezing in south central. What a mess that's going to be on the roads if that happens. Mid-20s around the middle Tanana Valley, colder northward into the Yukon Flats, single-digit territory there, 0 in Anaktuvuk Pass, and 5 to 10 below for the north slope. With the west coast in the lower to mid-20s into Bristol Bay, still below freezing there. Warm weather spreading northward tomorrow afternoon, teens and 20s for many locations, south central back in the mid to upper 30s to as warm as 40 degrees as you get down through the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak. Mid to upper 40s for many in southeast. 23 around Eagle, 28 in Nome and St. Lawrence and Savunga, 37 for St. Paul and St. George. Unalaska and Dutch Harbor also looking at 37. Wednesday morning, still mild, mid to upper teens for the central and western interior. Galena looking at about 12 degrees there around Kuskokwim, a little bit, McGrath I should say, in the upper Kuskokwim, upper 20s there. South central lower to mid 30s, southeast upper 30s to lower 40s, the north slope 5 to 10 below. Shishmaref looking at 17, and the Alaska Peninsula and Sand Point, mid to upper 20s to mid 30s, 32 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. What does Wednesday hold? 40s for many in south central, mid to upper 40s for southeast. The north slope, single digits to about 10 degrees for Kaktovik, Prudhoe Bay, and Dead Horse, with about 27 in Nome and 31 for Nunivak Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather now. IFR conditions will continue Tuesday morning across a large part of the Brooks Range and the Koyukuk valleys. On both sides of the Brooks Range, you'll notice that IFR conditions should be prevalent and all the way across the eastern Brooks Range and northward toward the Beaufort Seacoast. Also looking at the next wave of weather moving north across the central and eastern Gulf of Alaska, bringing at least MVFR conditions to a wide part of southeast, IFR in the north, and then also across the central and southern parts of southeast. MVFR conditions should be fairly widespread across the west coast to about Bethel and the Kuskokwim, and then southward toward the Wood-Tikchik Mountains and central sections of the Aleutians, with widespread VFR conditions south of the Pribilofs to the Alaska Peninsula. Also expect IFR to increase across the western parts of the Alaska Range, the Prince William Sound region, Wrangell, St. Elias, and into northern and higher terrain areas of southeast, with MVFR elsewhere across the Gulf and the inner channels of southeast. IFR also develops along the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, again with a steady south flow. On top of that, we'll be watching for turbulence, as you'll see here in just a few minutes. So Tuesday not looking very good for many areas passing through your favorite passes. For Wednesday morning, watch for IFR across northern southeast, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, and parts of the Copper Basin, as well as the Alaska Range. MVFR conditions across a large part of the Yukon Valley and northward, and across the west coast. Hit and miss areas of IFR through most of southwestern Alaska and around Nome and parts of the Seward Peninsula. By the afternoon, IFR is pushing toward the Chukchi coast, as well as remaining in areas in southwest. IFR across some of your favorite passes in the north again, and around Prince William Sound. Improvements noted across southeast, with MVFR at least across most of the interior and south and western Alaska, including Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula. Here's a look at your pass conditions in detail now for your Tuesday. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass leaning over toward IFR conditions as we go through your Tuesday. Rainy Pass will have a similar result. Windy Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions through most of the day. Isabel Pass also looking to see marginal conditions. Mentasta sneaks out of it again at VFR. Tanita Pass, we expect to see this lean over toward MVFR as the day goes on. And as we get into Portage Pass, at least MVFR, but you know in Prince William Sound a lot of that is going to be IFR, so if you're traveling across, keep that in mind. Portage Pass, though, at least marginal. Chilkoot and White Pass probably holding at IFR conditions there. The surface freezing line is taking a jog up into the western Bering Sea. You can see that actually dropping southward, though, from Kiska out toward Attu, and then across the eastern Gulf, levels as high as 2, 4, and even 6,000 feet sneaking into the Dixon entrance there, the 2,000-foot line close to the capital city, all the way out toward just about Resurrection Bay, but not quite, across the northern Gulf there for your Tuesday morning. Icing potential is pretty widespread, but at least about 2,000 to 3,000 feet in the north and about 4,000 to 5,000 feet across the Pribilofs all the way out into the interior, and then 5,000 feet across southeast and parts of the Gulf Coast to about Kodiak Island. So at least isolated moderate in these areas with some reduction in that risk generally north of the Alaska Range and into parts of the Kuskokwim Valley, but not all of it. So keep that in mind. At least some icing threat for most areas tomorrow. The jet stream has our ridge of high pressure taking a big push northward across the Alcan border. This is allowing cold air to sweep into the lower 48. Everyone's getting excited about that back in the lower 48 about how winter is finally arriving there. The downside is that it's allowing this ridge of high pressure to move northward and keep us in a steady southerly and warming flow across most of the interior, and thus the wind coming with that across south central and for the interior. So they get the cold, we get the heat, and we get a very active weather pattern thanks to that due south flow coming right into Alaska. You see that at 9,000 feet here. Steady southerlies across the Gulf, anywhere from 40 to 60 knots coming out of the south with high pressure to our south and east. Southerlies across the Brooks Range, across the Alaska Range, across south and west, and the west coast, anywhere from 20 to 30 knots with the next trough out over St. Matthew to the Pribilofs and northwesterlies coming into the chain. Not a lot of difference at 3,000 feet. The speeds are a little bit different, but still that steady south and southeasterly flow across the central and eastern Gulf. 35 knots over southeast, 50 knots over Yakutat, 20 to 50 knots over Prince William Sound and south central, and then back into a stronger flow across the Yukon Delta and Norton Sound at 50 knots from the south. Back into the northerlies here west of St. Matthew and the Pribilofs and most of the western chain at 3,000 feet. What about turbulence? We still have a risk for at least some isolated severe across the Alaska Range. High wind warnings will still be out, it looks like, tonight and tomorrow. Considerable moderate across a large part of the interior, southeast, south central, and Prince William Sound, and some improvements noted across south and western Alaska with at least isolated moderate across the north slope below 4,000 feet. Stay tuned. We'll be back with a look at your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Dual polarization technology is a major upgrade to the current radar system. It allows forecasters a better idea of what's actually out there and can help keep you safe.
Current radar technology transmits and receives information in the horizontal direction, which is very limited. Dual polarization technology, in addition to the horizontal, transmits and receives vertical energy, which allows forecasters to get information about the size, shape, and phase of the precipitation. We can use that information to better determine the precipitation type to expect at your given location.
There you have it. This new technology is currently being installed in radars across the country and is already being used by National Weather Service forecasters to produce better, more accurate forecasts. Learn more here and follow us. Want to know about the future of weather radar? Well, the National Severe Storms Lab has it here with its new phased array radar. Let's check it out.
It's a non-moving radar. It has 4 faces of the antenna, each pointing in different directions. One of the big advantages is that we're seeing so far, it can sample the area around the radar in less than a minute, maybe even a half a minute. And this is 5-6 times faster than what they can do today.
NSSL is leading the development of future weather radar with this project. Learn more here and follow us. The Storm Prediction Center is one of the NOAA weather partners. They are located in the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Greg Carbon gives us a glimpse into what the SPC does.
Our mission is to analyze and forecast severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds from those thunderstorms across the lower 48 states, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of the primary missions of the Storm Prediction Center is the issuance of severe thunderstorm and tornado watches across the country when conditions appear to be coming together to support the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes.
The world-class meteorologists in the Storm Prediction Center specialize in severe weather and keeping you safe. Learn more here and follow us.
The National Severe Storms Lab is working on increasing the lead time for severe weather warnings. The national average for tornado warnings is currently 13 minutes, but more notice would be helpful, especially for those in charge of moving large groups to shelter. Warn on Forecast will help forecasters issue hazardous weather warnings earlier. The project will give them more info about the chances of strong winds, large hail, and even tornadoes.
Currently, warnings are created by forecasters looking at the atmosphere outside, understanding its volatility, and then comparing that to how they see the Doppler radar presenting what's going on inside thunderstorms. Warn on Forecast is an idea where we're going to take the massive amounts of satellite, radar, and surface data and stick them all into a very high-resolution prediction model. And then by producing new forecasts every 15 or 20 minutes, the forecasters hopefully will be able to use that model to produce warnings that extend out to an hour.
Before the National Weather Service can use this tool, it must be developed and tested. One big challenge will be deciding how to get the model predictions to the forecasters.
I'm going to keep this one very low. I'm just adjusting the track.
These hazardous weather prediction models are going to produce a huge amount of output. And this fire hose of data is just too much for forecasters to handle in real time quickly. So in order to help deal with that, NSSL has developed a related project called Facets. And Facets is the methodology which will enable forecasters to focus very quickly on the most important threats.
Once Warn on Forecast and Facets are proven to be reliable and effective, then forecasters will be better able to inform you of threats nearby. Learn more here and follow us.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It is used for experiments that will allow forecasters to learn and apply new technologies.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is a really unique space throughout all of NOAA. And this is where the researchers and the operational folks come together in a common space to solve operational problems and to test new research tools that the research community is working on. The goal is to accelerate the transfer from research to operations of the newest tools and techniques.
People come from around the world to collaborate on this unique project.
We can bring together not only NOAA people, but also university people, faculty, researchers, private sector meteorologists, folks working in other countries in meteorology, forecasters, can all come together and focus on what the problem of the day is with the forecasters.
Each spring, several experiments occur in the hazardous weather test bed. Learn more here and follow us.
What are you looking at? And what are you ignoring? Did you notice the NOAA logo in the corner? Forecasters have a lot of information in front of them too. Every second counts during severe weather, and decisions about where to focus are constantly being made. This could be even more challenging in the future. Phased array radar will produce 4 to 6 times more information than what we have now, which brings us to the question researchers are hoping to answer. Will more radar information affect forecasters' decisions?
From our past experiments, we've learned a lot about how forecasters think during the warning decision process, but we've also learned that those thought processes are very complex, and for that reason, we need a better way to be able to track forecasters' cognitive activity.
Inbounds and possibly golf ball sized hail.
An eye tracker is a piece of technology that is used to determine in real time where someone's eye gaze is located. And these eye trackers are typically video-based, which means a camera sits below a computer monitor, and with infrared light and vector analysis, we can determine where a person is looking and how their eyes are moving.
Eye tracking is already being used in the medical field and air traffic control. Using similar research methods, NSSL is discovering the benefit for weather forecasting too. Phased array radar will give forecasters a lot more to think about. Understanding their decision-making process will help researchers develop even more user-friendly tools. So what's the benefit for you? Even better weather warnings. To learn more, check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time now for a quick check of your sea ice edge, and the Beaufort Sea, of course, is still closed off, and with easterly flow across the North Slope, we are moving ice away from the Chukchi coast and then building it back in and refreezing right along the coast, so watch for continued growth here across the Chukchi coast. The water temperature here in the Chukchi Sea right now is primed and just ready to freeze immediately. But the wind keeps things stirred up and just won't allow it to freeze. So it's close. It's really close to freezing it fairly quickly. And we're still also seeing that movement of ice away from the Kotzebue Sound and Norton Sound communities there, and then refreezing right along the coast. So if you're seeing open water, that's probably a lot of what's going on. And ice is still forming across the YK Delta, despite strong southerly and warm winds through the region. A lot of the ice, though, in Cook Inlet may have been melted off here in the last couple days. This is the latest, and of course you can always check for more updates anytime. weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. On to southeast, winds are going to come up in a gusty fashion across a large part of the inside passage there. Gusts to 35 inside Stevens Passage. 5-foot seas expected there all the way up toward Lynn Canal, more of a southeasterly flow at 15. Southerlies along the outer coast with seas from 15 to 18 feet. Stronger winds as you head out toward Prince William Sound, but from the Dixon entrance all the way up toward Cross Sound and Yakutat, you're looking at southerlies 30 to 35. And the winds will be coming up even more as we head into Wednesday, with several waves of low pressure working through the central and eastern Gulf. So just another one coming our way on Wednesday after probably 2 previously. South and easterlies across the inside passage 20 to 25. Stronger gusts will be possible with seas from 4 to 5 feet. The outer coast looking at 30 to 40 knot winds, anywhere from 18 to 23 foot seas there on Wednesday. For south central easterlies inside of Prince William Sound, 30 knots with a 7-foot sea. North and easterlies coming down Cook Inlet until the Barren Islands with more of an easterly flow there. South and easterly flow coming up toward Resurrection Bay at 10 to 12-foot seas on a 20 to 25 knot wind. The strongest winds out across the north and eastern Gulf, building in even more. The yellow colors indicate more of a higher sea expected. You can see that in the 20 to 25 foot range there, with storm force winds developing outside of Montague Island, 45 to 50 knots in the region, with 20 to 30 knots a little bit further down the coast, and 10 to 20 knots coming down Cook Inlet with a 5 to 7 foot sea there. Seas as high as 24 feet again outside of Prince William Sound inside, southeasterlies 40 knots with a 10-foot sea on Wednesday. For Bristol Bay, southeasterlies 20 knots with a 5-foot sea, 15 knots up and down most of the coast, including inside Shelikof Strait and east of Kodiak Island. Northeasterlies at 15 with a 9-foot sea on Tuesday. They will strengthen, but the bulk of the higher seas and higher winds will be a little bit further east, surrounding that low pressure center in the central Gulf. So northerlies 20 knots with an 11-foot sea there, 3-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, and 4 to 7-foot seas down the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula, with 15-knot winds inside of Bristol Bay midweek. A west and northwesterly flow for most of the chain on Tuesday, 10 to 20 knots, 25 knots across the central chain. Expecting about 11-foot seas there across the Bering Sea coast, 12 to 13-foot seas from Nikolsky out toward Adak with that northwesterly flow. By Wednesday, I expect a southerly flow to return. Low pressures building here across the western chain. You can see the easterlies coming up a little bit more at 25 to 30 knots, 9 to 10-foot seas here. And we're still in our southwesterly flow for the eastern chain, 15 to 20 knots with 7 to 8-foot seas. You're looking for 7-foot seas across the Pacific coast as you get into the midweek. For the west coast, 10 to 20-knot winds across the southern Bering. The further north you go towards St. Lawrence Island, the winds are going to strengthen here with a southeasterly offshore flow, 25 knots over the ice in Norton Sound, and 7-foot seas there around St. Lawrence Island. As you get into Wednesday, southerlies continue. They'll build a little bit more around St. Paul and St. George with a southeast wind at 25 with a 8-foot sea. Southerlies up towards St. Lawrence Island, 15 to 20 with 5 to 6-foot seas there, 7-foot seas around St. Matthew. And heavy freezing spray still possible around the Chukchi Sea. Remember, we've got decent winds for it. We've got really cold water, but we don't have a lot of ice just yet. So a north and easterly wind, 30 to 35 over 8 to 12-foot seas. So watch it out there. North and easterly winds across the Beaufort Sea, 10 to 20 knots generally from the east to northeast, up to 20 knots in the entire region on Wednesday. And east and southeasterly winds out of Kotzebue Sound and off the Chukchi coast, with 6 to 7-foot seas there in the open water. Let's recap the weather tonight. There's a lot of it. Wind and snow for most of our western communities and across the Yukon Valley, and strong southerly winds across most of the Alaska Range and South Central. What does that mean? Warm weather for South Central, periods of rain and snow at times, and increasing wind for Southeast as we get into Tuesday, with several waves of low pressure working in from south to north. We'll keep the risk of blowing snow around Kotzebue Sound and Norton Sound communities all the way down to the YK Delta and northwestern sections of the Arctic coast. As we get into Wednesday, the risk of cold air is not much of a threat. You can't see a low building out in the west, but several waves of low pressure will keep on coming.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.